Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Growing pressure for a former government minister to stand down as an MSP after he admitted inappropriate behaviour towards women. Anger from Scottish fishermen after it's revealed that the EU wants to keep access to the UK's fishing grounds as part of Brexit. Figures suggest there's widespread dissatisfaction with the country's local bus services.
One day they could be on time, the other does not show up at all.
It's okay at times. The winter it's a wee bit worse.
I find it very good actually, every half hour, there and back. Also on the programme, the SNP MP Mary Black speaks of the daily online abuse she endures because she's a woman. And in rugby, injury forces just one change to the Scotland side that beat England as they bid for victory in Dublin against Ireland. Good evening. There are growing calls for former Scottish Government Minister Mark MacDonald to stand down as an MSP after he admitted inappropriate behaviour towards women. Mr MacDonald has resigned from the SNP but intends to remain as an independent at Holyrood. An investigation found he exploited his position of power. Rebecca Curran reports.
Is Mark MacDonald in today?
No, he's taking a few days away with his family.
OK, so he's not expected to...
As pressure mounts on Mark MacDonald to resign, he's staying away from his office.
I have accepted that my behaviour towards two individuals fell below the level of professionalism that they were entitled to expect of me.
Yesterday, he apologised after an investigation into his conduct concluded his inappropriate behaviour towards two women had been deliberate in nature. He quit the SNP, but says he'll stay on as an independent MSP. I did speak to Mr MacDonald on the phone today, but he didn't want to do an interview. In 2007, he was elected to Aberdeen City Council alongside Kirsty Blackman, a long-time colleague and political ally. She's added her voice to growing calls for him to resign.
The people that I've spoken to have said that they want the chance to vote again. They want the chance to decide whether or not they want an SNP MSP representing them, or whether they want independent MSP representing them. I think he needs to consider his position in the light of the findings of the investigation. I think his constituents deserve the chance to vote again.
If he doesn't believe that he is capable of being an SNP MSP, but thinks he is capable of being an MSP, is sadly mistaken.
I think he should stay with it. He hasn't done me any wrong, you know.
I think he should be sacked. Totally just getting rid of.
I don't think somebody like that can be trusted with any political duties and any duties to do with the public.
A leading lawyer has been contacted about harassment allegations at the Scottish Parliament, some understood to be about Mark MacDonald.
I certainly don't think that any women that may have been subjected to his unwarranted behaviour should have to face him in their workplace.
Mark MacDonald says he's seeking help for his behaviour, which included inappropriate text messages, unwanted attention and exploitation of power. He says he will return to Holyrood next week. Rebecca Curran, Reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
Fishermen have described an EU proposal to keep existing access to fishing grounds after Brexit as absurd. The suggestion has come from EU Council President Donald Tusk, just days after the Prime Minister promised UK fishermen a fairer share of the catch. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Many in our fishing communities backed Brexit, hoping it would allow them to land a bigger share of the UK catch. That's more or less what the Prime Minister promised only last week.
The UK will regain control over our domestic fisheries management rules and access to our waters, and a fairer allocation of fishing opportunities for the UK fishing industry.
Today, in landlocked Luxembourg, the EU Council President staked a different claim. Donald Tusk published draft EU guidelines for negotiating future relations with the UK that raise the prospect of a free trade agreement, alongside calls for the maintenance of existing reciprocal access to fishing waters. Now, if the access our fishermen have to EU waters and the access EU fleets have to UK fishing grounds stays the same, then for many UK fishermen that would defeat the purpose of Brexit. According to one industry source, the EU is trying to have our fish cake and eat it. Fishermen say the EU position cannot be accepted.
It makes no allowance for the Prime Minister's comment on Friday and again on Sunday that we will take control of our waters upon Brexit and obtain fairer shares of fish in our own waters for British fishermen. It has nothing to do with that. It's an absurd position to start a negotiation from.
For the last 40 years, 60% of our fish have been leaving to be taken by the EU. That's the bargain of a lifetime. We would expect them to want to continue the status quo. That's unacceptable.
The UK government says it's determined to land a deal that benefits fishermen in Scotland and across the UK. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Well, Brexit has dominated the agenda at Holyrood today. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr is there. Andrew, the UK, the Scottish governments are due to have more Brexit talks tomorrow. How close are they to some sort of deal?
Well, Jackie, the clock is ticking and I don't think any deal is on the horizon yet. The UK government is, of course, taking powers back from Brussels after Brexit, and some are staying in London to protect UK trade, for example. The Scottish government says that's an attack on the devolution settlement. These powers should be here in this place, and they've launched their own continuity bill to protect the devolution settlement, and that passed its first parliamentary hurdle here at Holyrood tonight. Now, Mike Russell, the Brexit minister, will go into talks tomorrow armed with that, but he says he's hopeful, positive and purposeful. The Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, is positive too. Perhaps no deal tomorrow, but Nicola Sturgeon and Theresa May will meet next week. Perhaps a deal then, Jackie. We'll have to wait and see.
We will. Thank you very much, Andrew Kerr there. Frequently late and poor value for money. Is that your view of Scotland's buses? Well, a majority of people who took part in a survey on local services described them as unacceptable, with even greater concerns in rural areas. The Scottish Government says there could be a big shake-up ahead. Here's our transport correspondent, David Henderson.
It's Scotland's most used form of public transport. Each year, almost 400 million journeys are made by bus. But not everyone thinks the service is up to scratch.
It's extremely inconsistent. One day they could be on time, the other does not show up at all. I've had buses drive past me before as well.
It's okay at times. The winter it's a wee bit worse, but it's traffic and stuff.
I find it very good actually, every half hour, there and back. A lot of places would like that.
A new report by the charity Citizens Advice claims there's widespread dissatisfaction among bus passengers. Key among their concerns, it says, the frequency and punctuality of local services.
For some people, they said that in their village, services stopped altogether. So their access to the job market, their access to a hospital appointment, to get to see a GP, to go to the job centre was obviously diminished and would take longer and cost more for them to do that. So that's a real issue for people.
Bus passenger numbers are in decline. Over the last 5 years, the number of journeys made by bus in Scotland has fallen by 10%. At the same time, every other major form of transport, cars, planes, trains, even bicycles, have seen a rise in use.
It's more than 30 years since buses were deregulated by Margaret Thatcher's government. Almost all routes are now served by private companies. They say passengers are much more satisfied with their service than today's report suggests. Scottish ministers say changes are on their way.
We're bringing a transport bill forward this year, which will have a bus element to it, which will give local authorities the powers to do things like local franchising or introduce council-owned bus companies. On top of that, we've also seen some real action to tackle congestion, which is obviously one of the main reasons why buses are late in the first place.
That could mean more parts of the country ending up with a council-owned service like the one in Edinburgh. But it's unclear if that will tempt more people back onto buses.
Well, let's get more from David. David, we heard about potential reform of the buses by the government. Do we know what they are suggesting?
Some details are emerging, Jackie. It's clear that the Scottish Government has a real challenge on its hands, how to provide more, cheaper, better services to more parts of Scotland. Now, set out like that, it sounds well nigh impossible, but it would appear that the strategy to deliver on that involves moving away from deregulated bus services, the services we've got used to over many, many years. Now, right now, 200 bus companies across Scotland are able to operate. They're able to cherry pick routes. It means some routes are very well provided for. Other areas, other communities are neglected, and it would seem the Scottish Government plans to give more powers to local authorities to fill in those gaps. They'll be allowed in future, it seems, to partner with bus companies to provide more services. They'll be allowed to set up franchise agreements like the ones we see in London, which means that bus companies will be able to operate but can't cherry pick routes in a certain area. And it would seem plans are likely to emerge for the Scottish Government to allow local authorities to set up, to run, to operate bus services like the ones we see in Edinburgh. Now, the details are yet to emerge, but it would seem the status quo is no longer an option. Jackie.
David, thank you. The trial of a former accident and emergency consultant has heard that guns found in his home were working and could be fired to lethal effect. 62-year-old Martin Watt has admitted possessing 3 machine guns and 2 pistols, but denies having them with intent to endanger life. Katrina Renton reports.
Julia Bilsland is a forensic scientist specialising in firearms and ballistics. She had examined the weapons and ammunition found in Martin Watt's bedroom. She said she tested the Scorpion machine guns that look similar to these. They were in working order, capable of firing bullets with lethal effect for up to a mile, while 2 Valtro pistols, the same make as this, were also capable of firing bullets with a ball bearing attached and could cause lethal injury. Over 1,500 live rounds of ammunition were found in the house in Cumbernauld. There were magazines, including one that could discharge 20 bullets in a couple of seconds.
Ms. Bilsland described the ammunition found in the house. She said someone had tried to convert some of the bullets into hollow point expanding ones, sometimes known as dum-dums. She said this type of bullet is designed to cause the maximum damage.
Earlier, the court heard from forensic expert Michael Leatham. He analysed tubs of powder found in Dr. Watt's Cumbernauld home. He said it was gunpowder, which he believed was homemade. Representatives from NHS Lanarkshire gave evidence. Dr. Martin Watt had been an accident and emergency consultant at Monklands Hospital in Airdrie. The court heard he was dismissed in 2012 after a disciplinary process. A photograph of a doctor involved in the disciplinary, an image of a board member's car, and addresses were found on Dr. Watt's laptop that was seized from his house. It was said in court that also on the laptop there was a step-by-step guide on how to make explosives and a history of searches, including for costumes, fake beards and disguises.
Martin Watt has pleaded guilty to having firearms and ammunition in his home, but he denies possessing them with the intent to endanger anyone's life. The Crown case is now closed here at the High Court in Glasgow, and the defence is expected to lead evidence tomorrow. Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland.
A man has appeared in court after he and a teenage girl were injured during an incident inside a police vehicle in Perth. 45-year-old Stuart Limer and the 17-year-old were arrested and taken to hospital following the incident at the city's train station on Monday. Mr. Limer from Uttoxeter was charged with possessing a blade or object with a point in a public place and was remanded in custody. The Scottish Youth Theatre is to close at the end of the summer after failing to secure long-term funding. The organisation, which has been running drama classes for children for almost 40 years, recently lost its funding from Creative Scotland. A letter to parents described it as devastating news. The SNP MP Mary Black has revealed the extent of some of the sexist and homophobic insults she receives on social media. She was speaking in a debate in Parliament looking at making misogyny a hate crime. Ms Black said MPs should examine the example they set. Well, our political correspondent Nick Ardley is at Westminster. Nick.
Jackie, I think most social media users would readily acknowledge that online abuse exists, but sometimes specific examples highlight the impact it can have. Mary Black listed some really quite shocking messages she's received in her time as an MP. They include language that's so offensive we can't broadcast it. But she argued that people had become comfortable using offensive terms, that they've been normalised, and that's created an environment in which women can be abused.
I've been assured multiple times that I don't have to worry because I am so ugly that no one would want to rape me. Now, all of these insults have been tailored to me because I am a woman, as a woman. Now, we can kid ourselves that these are a few bad, anonymous people on Twitter, but it's not. This is everyday common language. Now, I'm aware that everyone in here is uncomfortable at hearing these insults. I feel uncomfortable reading them out. And yet there are people who feel comfortable flinging these words around every day. And when it goes unchallenged, it becomes normalised. And when it becomes normalised, it creates an environment that allows women to be abused.
Ms Black said that MPs in particular need to set an example, but she highlighted a case recently where she was in the voting lobbies and she was physically pressed up against a male colleague who'd been accused of sexual misconduct. Now, the UK Parliament is looking at introducing a new code of practice to try and tackle these issues. Many questions have been raised about how to tackle abuse online. Answers have been few and far between.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's almost exactly 6:45. A reminder now of tonight's top story. There are growing calls for the former Scottish Government Minister Mark MacDonald to stand down as an MSP for acting inappropriately towards women. And still to come, the attempt to keep the organisation responsible for looking after our forests. Proposals for an extension to the Edinburgh tram line would involve exhuming 200 graves. A public consultation has begun over the new line, which would run from Edinburgh Central to the Forth. Concerns have been expressed over whether it's needed and on the impact building works would have on local businesses. Maura Kinnerber reports.
The new line would run from the city centre through Leith to Newhaven. The revived tram idea is being put to public consultation, though one study suggests 91% think transport's already fine here.
I think they're happy with the current arrangements, but what happens when the city grows? We are a growing and developing city. We're expecting a much larger population in 20 years' time. This is about future-proofing the city. It will enable us to move large numbers of people around safely and securely and reliably.
The £165 million plan involves months of disruption as utilities and more are moved.
This graveyard used to extend for a vast area beyond these current boundary walls, across the road, even beyond these houses and tenements behind us here. So plans to bring the trams, if the extension's approved, right through this route will mean digging up below the road surface to exhume hundreds of bodies below.
The church does not object, so long as it's done respectfully.
We're going to have to exhume, we think, roughly about 200 burials dating back to the 14th, 15th century. As archaeologists, we're very familiar with that process, so each body will be individually labelled and excavated and boxed up accordingly. And then we'll do a whole full set of forensic tests on them as well.
Leith Walk was dug up for trams before. They never came. Businesses were badly hit.
I lost a business a few years ago to the tramworks. I think there will be a sea of devastation on businesses up and down Leith Walk. I would hope that they try their best to support those businesses, but any interruption to business is very difficult to bear.
Trams kept going last week when other services were stuck, but few will forget the £400 million overspend and years of delay and dispute the Edinburgh trams caused. An inquiry has yet to report what went wrong, but the council insists it's learnt lessons. The 6-week consultation's a chance to have your say. Maura Kinnerber, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A last-ditch attempt has been made to convince politicians not to abolish the Forestry Commission in Scotland. A Scottish Government bill to make forestry a government-controlled department is about to go through its final stages at Holyrood. Our environment correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
They manage 9% of our land, but since its creation, Forestry Commission Scotland has been a non-ministerial government department. That means it's been run with minimal political interference. With the Forestry Bill, that will change, and some in the sector feel taking it in-house will be a mistake.
It's created quite a lot of bad feeling. There's those in civil society that feel they've been browbeaten, and it almost looks to us from the outside as if parts of Forestry Commission have been bullied into accepting this arrangement, which will essentially break up an organisation which was going to be 100 years old in another year's time.
I mean, the thing about forestry, it's a long-term business.
And it's not just a single voice calling for the Parliament to reject the bill. 9 organisations have jointly written to MSPs to express their concerns.
Pulled too close into the Scottish Government, we're just going to be dragged from pillar to post depending on the latest whim of the latest minister. You know, ministers last maybe a couple of years if they're lucky. You know, forestry is a much longer term business than that.
Everybody knows who the Forestry Commission is, and it's really foolish to really turn your back on that kind of brand recognition. It's built up a huge amount of expertise and is now doing a tremendous job in what is a £1 billion industry for the country.
Some in the industry think scrapping the Forestry Commission is a good move, and the Minister rejects the claim of bullying.
Forestry, you're absolutely right, is a long-term business. They are correct. Everybody agrees that. And that's why we believe the strategy should be set over a long period of around a decade. But Parliament can, of course, review it and refine it as it chooses.
MSPs are still to vote on the bill. If it's passed, Forestry Commission Scotland will be abolished in 2019, its centenary year. Kevin Keane reporting Scotland at a woodland in Fife.
Well, the Scottish Government has announced it'll match funding for the creation of 50 football memory boxes, which can be used by people with dementia. The Football Memories project has created boxes which contain memorabilia, including jerseys, a ball, boots and football games. It's designed to stimulate memories in former players and fans with dementia. It's believed that even smells of the game can be a powerful reminder.
There's the liniment, you smell that in the memory box that we've seen this morning, the old boots. The lads are accusing me of wearing them, and the ball, the old leather, heavy leather ball, and the jersey that Dennis Law wore when he beat England down there. So these memories come flooding back when you get into the memory box, and the memorabilia that associates with football is, I think, motivational for the old-timers like myself to talk about the game.
Well, let's go to rugby now, and Scotland head coach Gregor Townsend has named his team for Saturday's Six Nations clash against Ireland and Dublin. Edinburgh player Blair Kinghorn will start his first international in a match Scotland must win to take their title challenge to the final weekend of the tournament. More now from our rugby reporter Andy Burke.
But there is Blair Kinghorn, the Edinburgh, full-back winger, very, very quick.
Blair Kinghorn's first taste of international rugby was a memorable one, coming off the bench to be part of a famous Calcutta Cup win over England. Now Gregor Townsend has pitched him in from the start against Ireland, perhaps unexpectedly.
Yeah, we were just in the team meeting and then he pulled me aside and told me, so yeah, big surprise, but no, a chance I'm really excited for. It was a bit of a whirlwind for that 50 minutes I was on, can't really remember much of it, but no, it was a brilliant game to get my debut in, so just really looking forward to this opportunity on Saturday.
Blair Kinghorn, he started the try, he finishes the try.
Blair has trained in the back three last week and again this week. Yeah, he was delighted. We really like the balance of our back three with 3 fullbacks. All 3 have played regular fullback, and we do expect that we'll get some kicks to catch.
Well, the introduction of Blair Kinghorn in place of the injured Tommy Seymour is the only change to the Scotland team from the side that beat England here last time out. Now it's on to Dublin to face Ireland, a challenge Gregor Townsend believes is among the toughest in world rugby.
It's going to be an interception. It's taken by Jacob Stockdale, and it will be a fanfare in Dublin as Stockdale goes over.
And they're top 3 team in the world. They've got a very good home record. There's not many or any weaknesses in their team. They get the detail right, they get the physicality right, they've got a strong kicking game, so you've got to be your very best to win.
Well, Scotland were at their best the last time the sides met, beating the Irish at Murrayfield last season. Repeat the trick in Dublin and they'll set up a final day showdown for the Six Nations title. Andy Burke reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, from your ooh moment to your aw moment. A picture of the first polar bear to be born in captivity in the UK for 25 years has been released. It was born, it is lovely, isn't it? It was born just before Christmas at the Highland Wildlife Park near Kincraig. The cub and its mother are being kept away from the public until late March. Keepers at the park haven't yet been able to establish whether the cub is male or female.
but a couple of the keepers have been up there when Mama and the cub have been out. And the cub's quite bold, and it's quite curious as to what's going on, so it's not afraid of anybody or anything like that. So they've actually been able to see it, and usually you can hear when that happens because there's a high-pitched squealing comes from the polar bear area from the keepers, you know, and when they've seen the cub, but because it is the epitome of cuteness.
Well, here's Christopher. I couldn't have introduced you better myself. Sorry.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there. Wasn't too bad today weather-wise, really, was it? But what a difference a week makes. This time last week had a red warning. Today, blue, a more appropriate colour. Beautiful picture here from one of our weather watchers on the Dornoch Firth. And you can see on the satellite picture this swirl of cloud with low pressure overhead, but also you can see the breaks. You can see where we had the best of the sunshine. And under that cloud, a rash of showers towards the west coast and across west central Scotland. Further east, reasonably dry, and little change really as we go overnight. There'll be a few icy patches around, quite a cold night. Town and city temperatures there sub-zero. So a cold start to the day tomorrow, a frost, and again a risk of ice until about 9 in the morning, and perhaps a few mist patches, but those soon lift. And then for most of the day, for most of the country, it's dry with some brightness and some sunshine, but once again a rash of showers towards the west coast and through the Hebrides, and cloudy with some rain for Shetland. So by mid-afternoon, well, a mixture of sunshine, some cloud and 1 or 2 light showers. 5 or 6 Celsius quite easily, but in the southwest, perhaps up to around 7 or 8 down towards the Rins of Galloway. Elsewhere, a pleasant day, certainly out with those showers. Given any elevation, they could have a wintry mix, but for most of us, if you catch a shower, it will be of rain. Towards the east and northeast, some lovely spells of sunshine, certainly up towards Caithness and in towards Orkney by this point, but as you can see there, Shetland still under the cloud and fairly damp. Rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, little in the way of change for many, but a number of heavy showers pushing in across the Highlands and the Western Cairngorms, and those will be of snow. And still with us come first thing Friday morning, but really it's a high ground feature. Elsewhere on Friday, another dry day, and once again some sunshine, temperatures slowly creeping up. And then to the weekend. Well, Saturday looks all right, mostly dry, some rain later on, some hill snow comes Saturday night, and then that clears away to leave Sunday largely cloudy, but also largely dry, and once again just a bit milder. That's the forecast.
Thank you, Christopher. And that is Reporting Scotland. Our next main news is at 10:30. Join us for that if you can. Until then, from everyone in the team across the country, good evening.